Joining us on the line right now is Jeff Schapiro from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, a political reporter, a columnist. He's been following the McDonald trial very, very closely. And actually, he's been covering Richmond, are you ready for this? 30 years. So This guy seen a few things come and go. Good morning to you. How are you, Jeff?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
All right.
So life without parole.
The jury is going to get their instructions from the judge today, and they will ostensibly begin deliberations on this trial that we've all been watching so closely. I've always heard it said that in a trial, it's the instructions to the jury that are perhaps the most important thing that gets overlooked. It's very important how this is laid out and the choices that the jury gets to make.
Judge James Spencer, who has presided over this trial since July 28th, expects it'll take him about 2 hours to outline to the jury its charge. And, of course, these instructions are the parameters within which the jurors will determine whether to convict or acquit former Governor Bob McDonnell and his wife, Maureen. There are some complexities here in that, in the governor's case, there are 13 felony counts. 12 of those are corruption charges, and 6 and 6 are coupled. So it's apparent that on some of these charges, the jurors can't convict on one without convicting on the other. And, of course, they all carry different penalties. If memory serves, the single bank fraud charge that the governor faces alone carries a steeper penalty than some of the corruption charges. But for purposes of conversation, if the McDonnells were convicted on all counts, in theory, they could be looking at decades in jail and millions of dollars in fines.
And, Jeff, I heard that during the government's closing arguments, they made a very compelling connection between a phone call, a very important timeline here, where the governor had on the phone Johnny Williams. Johnny Williams agreed to give him an unsecured loan of $50,000, and within 6 minutes, the governor then turned around and instructed members of his staff to let Johnny Williams have basically let his product be seen and discussed and evaluated by members of the Virginia government. Is that kind of the crux here? That's sort of the quid pro quo issue?
Well, again, quid pro quo in the full and formal sense is really not at the heart of the government's case. This is an honest services corruption case. The government contends by behaving as he and Mrs. McDonnell allegedly did, the citizens of Virginia were denied the honest services of their duly elected governor. The courts have said, and the law recognizes, that a quid pro quo, as you call it, needn't be explicit. However, to your point, the government on Friday, in its closing arguments, as well as its rebuttal, very sharply focused on the timing of this case and the relative speed with which things would happen, the very compact schedule under which they seem to occur. As Mike Dry said in his rebuttal, Mike Dry, the lead prosecutor, the timing on this case is devastating. And it speaks to the, as the government claims, the transactional nature of the McDonnell's relationship with Johnny Williams. And it's important to point out that Johnny Williams is fully protected from prosecution. His lawyers negotiated an immunity agreement in return for his testimony against the McDonnells. And one wonders how that might factor in the jury's deliberations. I've heard it suggested that because he is, in effect, acknowledged wrongdoing on his part, if you will, criminal wrongdoing, that perhaps the jury would feel badly for the McDonnells. But, of course, the big difference here is that Bob McDonnell was elected to the Commonwealth's highest office, a position of public trust.
You wrote a very interesting column that says that regardless of what happens in this particular case, the fact that a case has been brought may well change Virginia politics going forward.
This is an extraordinary experience for Virginians. And, Virginia is a greatly changed state. It's this suburban dynamo. Come here's people like myself now dominate the state's politics and economy. But that said, this is a new and very unusual experience for Virginians. One of the problems that Virginia has consistently failed to fully address is the behavior of its elective officials and the rules, if you will. The ethics guidelines are porous to non-existent depending on one's perspective, and it's difficult to fathom that regardless of the outcome of this trial, that there won't be considerable pressure on the governor and the legislature to do something substantive in the area of ethics reform. Now, Governor McAuliffe has indicated that he is going to try again. He tried unsuccessfully in his first go. And there's a wild card here. In 2015, Virginians will decide control of their legislature. All 140 seats will be up, and even though partisan redistricting is going to protect a lot of these folks, nonetheless, there will still be considerable pressure, one would assume, on the worthies to do something.
Well, you call this the Virginia way. Has this sort of thing, and would past politicians, maybe 20, 30 years ago, look at the charges against Governor McDonnell and sort of say, well, yeah, what's the big deal?
Well, Virginia politics has always been conducted with a measure of intimacy, keeping in mind that to the outside world, Virginia is still very much a southern state. I would argue that it's more mid-Atlantic. But when it was very much that southern state, because of things like the poll tax and literacy tests, vast chunks of the population, principally African American and low-income whites, were disenfranchised. There was a small and very manageable electorate here. Politics was the purview of a handful of like-minded, very conservative in some instances, white guys. There wasn't a lot of transparency to politics, so it's possible that some of this stuff was going on and Virginians didn't even know about it.
All right, so gut feeling, did the prosecutors make their case?
I think the government made a very compelling case, but one is not going to second guess jurors. Over 5 weeks, that's 25 days of testimony, 67 witnesses. There were few, if any, real displays of emotion by the jurors. Judge Spencer's been very solicitous of them. It's only the judge who has occasionally encouraged them to smile and has actually elicited a few laughs on occasion.
All right. Well, listen, we will check in with you when we get a verdict. Jeff, thank you so much.
Have a great day. Thank
Jeff
you.
Schapiro with the Richmond Times.